they invited me to come and talk to the Washington Post on the 19th, and I told them they have to keep doing that work because that adds, in my mind, to the brand of journalism at the Washington Post.
It's great.
If we go to,
instead of just raw data.
I know,
but
if we pander to the audience and only do McDonald's all the time, for instance, I got 500,000 views on a picture of the night, okay? And if I wanted to get hits, that's what I would be doing all day long. Just let's talk about the iPhone, let's talk about Antenna Gate. If you only do McDonald's news like that, you don't build the kind of audience that brings real value.
What's your agenda? Not you.
Well, actually, what I would ask him is, like, every time we're all about impressions. So when people, do you have any idea what format is giving you the most impressions? I mean, is it YouTube? Is it MySpace? Is it your actual people downloading your CDs and listening to them?
Honestly, in my world, we just use all of it. That's it. You know what I mean? We don't sit there and try to differentiate between who's the biggest, who's the best. Of course, you're going to know that there's, like, say, for instance, in our world, there's a site called, I don't even want to get too detailed with this, World Star Hip Hop. It's like crazy hits. The other day I was looking up its amount of traffic. It was bigger than so many other sites that should have been bigger than. But it's because they put up so much crazy stuff. They'll put up like a bum rapping, drunk, gets hit by a car, and then, a naked girl kisses him. And then it'll get so many hits. So now I've got to put my real content in between next to that because they're getting all the traffic. I got publicists, they'll be like, okay, we need to do this,
How many publicists do you have?
Two.
You have 2 publicists.
And I pay for them myself too. Universal don't pay.
John, who are you hanging out like?
They'll be like, we need to do this non-profit organization thing because, we got to take care of these kids in Africa and all this stuff. And, you would really have some real cause and you wanted to get out there and change the world, but then it gets overshadowed by all these other little kids on YouTube with this cat jumping up and down. And it's like, so you kind of got to find a way to take the information that I need to get out there.
What did you think about the Old Spice commercials? Because that was kind of...
I thought it was genius. There's that guy right there, Jeff. He's like making viral videos about the Old Spice commercials. Because he's just like thought it was just so genius. And I was looking at it, and I was like, man, I actually talked to somebody the other day, and I was like, well, what do you think of companies? I advise companies. And I was like, what do you think about this campaign? And they said, I think they got lucky. And I was like, I looked at it, and the idea was very good. I think it's an idea that other companies wish they would have thought of, but they just didn't.
But you can only do that once, right? So you got to come up with something else.
But, Kobe jumped over a car, and that went viral crazy. Nobody thought of it, but it was a good idea. I don't think it was luck. I think it was people that were sitting there thinking of good creative things. There's some companies that are now trying to do, like, I saw another commercial. It looks like they're trying to beat the Old Spice commercials, but it just wasn't as good. Good content rises to the top, and sometimes the craziest, nastiest content rises to the top, but you just got to find a way to get there.
Okay, so let's drill down that just a little bit, and I want to open it up to people who want to ask some questions here. But one of the fundamental questions that I put on the thing is, are we better off? Now, I know that Arrington and Scoble and I don't have to have real jobs, right? Because of the open media revolution. Cam is better off because he has more power, right, than the old musician cat. So the question is, though, is the world better off? We have more access to information. Is that better information? Does anybody have an opinion on that?
Yeah.
Rock on.
We're in a fractious cycle right now between the old school and the new school. I think I'm seeing all sorts of evidence that having more people connected on a network gives us eventually better access and better information. There are some places, and we can talk about those places where the local city council isn't being covered anymore because the San Jose Mercury News doesn't have journalists there, and the Twitter and the blogger world hasn't yet invested the time to sit there. But the mayor can blog, the guy who builds houses can blog, the guy who sits on the city council can blog. In fact, I sat next to one in San Carlos on the way to TED, and they all have access to us now in a way that they never did before. And I think that's a huge positive.
You said it's better information?
Well, it's not necessarily better because there was bad information that
San Jose Mercury News. The first time I met Steve Wozniak, he said, "Don't believe a thing you read about me in the San Jose Mercury News."
You know what I love the best now is I remember in the old days, like when I started a company in 2000, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article about us that we worked so hard to get. And they finally wrote this article and mentioned us and talked about us. And they got it a little bit wrong. And you know what I can do now if I'm an entrepreneur and somebody writes something that's wrong? I can go write a blog post saying exactly why it's wrong. Even though you read that blog, a few people will pick it up and it might sort of become sort of the counterpoint. And it makes us be more careful in our writing because the people we're writing about can shout right back at us. And in the old days, you couldn't do that. I think that's unquestionably better.
I think that feedback loop is incredibly important. I also think that you're talking about competition, that you do have the son you're talking about, Jim Michaels, and that definitely was a force, and that was necessary. We had, in order to produce, you had to have, large organizations that had the economic wherewithal. And then everyone was concerned that now that anyone can produce, that, truth is going to go out the window. But competition, I think, if Michael, lies and makes up stuff, eventually he's going to be out of business. There's 4 or 5 other guys who built this place. And that's going to be a check, even though the person doesn't have any morals.
I'm not even sure we're at the core of this. We're a nice little media businesses and stuff, but if you want to talk about real disruptions around here, like the Neta video out of Iran, it's just amazing. Or for that matter, what Al-Qaeda
Let's talk about that, because I talked to Evan Williams the day the Iran election happened. I said, do you realize what Twitter is doing for the world right now, that people can pass along information without talking about a freaking committee?
Remains to be seen, because nothing's really changed in Iran as a result.
I was in physics class during the '89 earthquake. It took me 6 hours to get a photograph from here to the East Coast. I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to convince a committee.
I'm making your point, dude, okay? But we don't really understand that stuff yet. WikiLeaks, what any of this needs. This is, get historical, the printing press did amazing things. It also caused the wars of the Reformation that wiped out 1/3 of Germany. These are very disruptive things, and it take a long time to work out. Are we better off? I'm not sure that's an interesting question, because we're not going back.
Right. Man, it's inevitable, right? But to me, the only part that kind of really, really bothers me is like a couple weeks ago and a couple months ago, I went on Fox Business Channel, and I'm sitting there with the guy that's about to interview me, and he starts asking me, telling me the pre-questions. And the pre-questions that he's about to ask me, like half of them are wrong, and I'm like, where are you getting this stuff from? He says, Wikipedia. Wikipedia, any fan, any kid can go on there and put the information that they want. So Fox Business Channel was about to interview me on some stuff that was false. And they thought it was because a fan did that. So I have to tell my publicist, okay, we got to change that every day.
You have one just for Wikipedia.
Whichever one they go back to, And it's so crazy because it's like now, even though we have reputable sources and bloggers and stuff that are like putting out real facts, you know what I mean? That's not sexy. People want to put the false stuff is more sexy, and that's what spreads.
To be honest, you're famous. I mean, people are always going to be.
Yeah, in my world, it might be different for y'all. My Twitter timeline is way different.
There's stuff I'm waiting for.
I gotta say, I don't worry about openness. I worry about the opposite, which is I think we think that the internet's always going to be free, it's always going to be open, and we forget that a huge amount of the internet isn't free and open. And frankly, I mean, it scares me to think about this, but it could be a majority of the internet is tightly controlled. I mean, all of China, of course. You can go Iran, you can go country after country, and even more Western countries are putting laws in place that where control is happening. And I think that's something to be.
It's interesting though. As an American, I was much more worried about it than when I got there. Because I visited China, the first thing that they did when I arrived was hand me a list of proxy servers. And they all know how to get around their rules. At the blogger conference there in I believe it was Guangzhou, they all were wearing shirts with river crabs on them. Well, if you take 2 of the characters in the Chinese language that mean the firewall, you change those characters just slightly and it means river crab. So they live in the river crab society and they make fun of it and they know how to pass information back.
Some of them.
There's
a lot of people in jail. There's a lot of people who don't have information.
There's a lot of people in jail here for doing, selling dope on the street that shouldn't be in jail either. We can have arguments about our society.
So Chris, you're really by definition an arms dealer to the open media
Yeah, but arms don't kill people, so.
Right.
Call them arms, but yeah, yeah.
It's an analogy.
Sure, yeah.
So, like, altruistically, do you feel like, does that make you kind of go, hey,
I mean, what gets me, yeah, what I'm excited, and passionate about is, again, in order to be a journalist, you had to go, get a job with someone, and first we talked about cost of production, and, we've solved that. We talked about the cost of distribution, and I think that's, being solved. Now I think the big problem for a lot of folks is the cost of economics. Like, okay, now I can physically set up a printing press and say something, but can I make a living off of it? And that's where I think the next wave is going to have to be. That anyone, Frederick can quit his job, and I'm sure build a site. It's not going to cost him nothing to do. Get an audience, it costs him virtually nothing to do. But can you make a living?
Getting an audience is tougher than you.
There'll be an audience.